I'm well, Todd, and thank you so much for having me. I'm having a little out of body experience as I listen to you describe me. hmm Yeah, just to give it a little bit of context, Todd. Thanks for the intro. My most of my career was spent as the owner operator of a couple of technical staffing firms, as you suggested. So I was a recruiter, a technical recruiter, and then became a manager of such people, and then the owner of a company that hired those people. So I've done a lot of training and a lot of coaching inside my own businesses. And when you're helping someone find work, that whole process is essentially coaching and training on tactics and strategies. So it was inherent. And I grew up as a teacher and a mentor. My dad was a mentor of sorts and a teacher of sorts. He was a fighter pilot and a commercial airline pilot, but he was a coach. He was a mentor, and so that was kind of passed along to me. But I wasn't formally doing the teaching and coaching. It was just part of my business. And then after I sold my last business, and there's a long personal story to that involves divorce and overcoming hardship and single parenthood and all that, which might be interesting for another time. But I was then in a position where I had no business. I sold it, and I was taking care of my kids, and they were in their early teens. And I was mom and dad, and there was a lot of driving around volleyball and little league and parent teacher conferences and doctor's appointments. I did all that. So I made a conscious decision in that transition that I was going to be flexible and I was going to move around. So how am I going to do that? Because I was previously in a brick and mortar office with physical people in the office that I went to every day from 9 o'clock until 5 o'clock and so on and so forth. And I had never unplugged from that. So I decided I was going to take all that experience and start teaching that to people, because as I told you in the kind of pregame warm up, when I started helping my kids out of school find work, we all had this revelation that, Dad, you know a lot of stuff that could be very helpful to a lot of people, and they don't teach this stuff in school. So I decided to become a coach, a trainer, a consultant, an advisor, a mentor. All of those titles work depending on the context. Um, and I was going to set out to help people move forward professionally, take that next step professionally, whatever that might be. And as you know, I'm sure you can have a job you don't like, you can have a boss you don't like, you can be doing work you don't like, you might get fired, you might get laid off. There's a litany of reasons why someone might want to, quote unquote, do something else. And here I am now finding myself in this situation where it's a very emotional decision for people. It's scary for people. It creates anxiety. Sometimes there's shame if you got laid off. There's self-worth issues and self-doubt issues. There's a whole it's almost like playing psychologist if you think about it. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed serving people, and I had a lot of answers because I had made a lot of mistakes over the years in helping a lot of other people. So I just set out to do this, and now what I'm faced with is the challenge I have now, Todd, is how do I get this in front of more people? because it's one thing to do it one-on-one, like in a discussion like this with you. It's another thing to do it in groups. And then another thing entirely to say, well, can I put this material in a place online where people can read it and watch it and listen to it and then engage with me? And the engagement with me becomes more of an enrichment experience as opposed to a learning experience, more of nuance and polishing and refinement. And so that's what I'm working on now, is how to scale the wisdom, if you will, out to the masses. And it's challenging because the farther away from me that training gets, the more nervous I get about the quality of that training. I'm a bit of a control freak when it comes to the quality of what I do. But in terms of how to get in touch with me, I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find. My last name is Aylward. That's also my domain name, markaylward.com. So if you find me on LinkedIn and connect with me, which I encourage people to do, read all my stuff, watch all my stuff. It's all free on there. Get a taste of it, get a taste of how I see the world. And if it resonates with you, then I have a calendar link that's on my website and my LinkedIn profile. And I give you 30 minutes on my dime where we just talk and I ask you some questions, and I determine at the end of that 30 minutes if I can help you. And if I can, I'll let you know how I think I can help you. And if I can't, I'll tell you that too. And then that becomes a relationship that turns into an exchange for money and for hours of my time. And I've got some documents that support what that program actually looks like. But it's very simple. And I start with what we were talking about earlier, which is, who are you? Who do you want to be? Let's have a conversation about you. And as you suggested, Todd, most people don't have that conversation with themselves, or they're really scared about having that conversation with themselves, and they don't know what it looks like. So I'll throw the mic back to you. I could talk about that all day long. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, I have to go back to my childhood. I mean, it was the way I was raised. I was raised in a spiritual family. My I was raised Catholic. Went to Notre Dame, Irish Catholic school. A couple of uncles who were priests, and an aunt who was a nun. My dad's a very religious guy, still alive and well at 96. And it was just always an expectation that I was going to help, that I was going to serve other people, that was going to be part of what I did, whatever that might look like. How I got into recruiting was, in hindsight, I guess, kind of circumstantial. It was coincidental. My girlfriend, I found out one day that she told me she was pregnant, and she became the mother of my three children eventually. But at that particular juncture, it was like, okay, I'm wandering around. To your point, didn't really know who I was, what I was doing. Not a lot of confidence, maybe. Uh, Probably looked like I was confident, but not from the inside out. I didn't feel it. But I stepped up that day. I just remember saying, "Okay, it's time to do some adulting. It's time to step up, and it's time to take care of, make sure your family has everything they need." And it was a major shift in my life. I literally flipped a switch on the inside and said, "It doesn't matter what you want to do. This is what you have to do. Now go figure out what that is." And I just started, as I would recommend to anybody, if you don't know what you want to do, voraciously looking into things. And I'll refer back to something you said earlier about sales and the fact that you can make a lot of money. My father, the only thing he really said to me was, try to find a job where there's no ceiling on how much you can make. And that's what sales is. I mean, if you're in sales and there's a ceiling on what you can make, you're in the wrong sales job. So go find another job where there's no limit on how much you can make, except your effort and your success and productivity. So I started looking around, and one of the conversations I had, I walked into my parents' condominium, and my mother was there with her best childhood friend and this Australian gentleman who she had just married, my mom's best friend. And very nice guy. I didn't, at first time I met him, we had a glass of wine together. They were going to go eat dinner. And before they went to dinner, I said, look, I'm in this situation now where I'm looking for something to support my family, and I really don't know what to do. May I ask, what do you do for a living? Another technique I highly recommend. Simple, just ask. And he said, I recruit petrochemical engineers for Saudi Arabian oil companies. And I said, huh? And I said, can you unpack that for me? What does that mean? And he said, the Saudi Arabian oil companies, which are cash rich, have difficult time recruiting around the world for very gifted petrochemical engineers to help them refine and distribute the oil that they're so rich with, because nobody wants to live in Saudi Arabia that isn't Saudi Arabian. So what they did was they formed these groups where they give 3-year contracts to these specific petrochemical engineers. They pay them 3 or 4 times what anyone else would pay them in terms of salary. They give them a free home, a free car, and they pay their expenses for the whole 3 years. And then they let them go off to wherever else they want to go. So guys and gals can go in there and enrich themselves for a few years. And I said, well, I thought companies hired their own people. And he said, oh, no, no, particularly when it comes to critically skilled people with specific advanced degrees doing very specific stuff. They contract out to agencies like mine. And I go out and I find these people, I vet them, I produce them, they interview them, vet them, and select and choose. And I said, do you mind my asking, how do you get paid? He said, I get a percentage of their starting salary. And I said, well, what is that? What's the math on that? And he said, it's 25% of their starting salary. And I said, well, what are the starting salaries? And he said, 300 or 400 grand. And I said, I think I'm going to be a recruiter. That sounds good to me. So I picked up the newspaper. This is how long ago it was, the Sunday paper. I went through the ads. I found a couple of recruiting jobs. I called up Monday morning. The first one I called, a company named Carico, I cut my teeth there for 3 years. They brought me up for an interview and hired me on the spot. And they stuck me in the software engineering group next to a guy that was going to become one of my best friends. And that's how I just dropped into recruiting. And so, God was definitely looking over me, because I remember my first placement. He was an electrical engineer. He was a single father with 2 young kids, and he was about to lose his home. He'd been out of work for a long time, and the bank was about to foreclose on his home, and I found him a job. And I can't tell that story without getting a little emotional even now, because I changed his life. And he told me that, you saved my life, Mark. I mean, imagine that for a 26-year-old kid. And so I just thought to myself, this is exactly what I was meant to do. This is perfect. I'm in the middle of this really challenging and emotional and important decision. And I'm the guy that both parties have to trust. And I'm very trustworthy. So I was called to this. And I can just go on and on about that. But that's how I get in. And as soon as I figured out that's what I wanted to do, I just started digging in, and then I found my mentor a few years later, and the rest is history. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it was very early on, and I can't remember who I can attribute this to. Probably Bo. I had a mentor at the first company that I just told you about, and then I went off and moved to Florida from Boston, where I grew up, in because of the opportunity that I was introduced to with this gentleman named Paul, who I was working with a young lady at the first company, and when I told her what was going on in my personal life and I needed a change, she said you should talk to Paul, and I went and spoke with him. But and then I moved down to Florida and started up a company. But my belief system, there was always service was always part of it. I always felt compelled to serve other people, to help other people. Um, I don't know why. I just always did. But sales early on became very evident to me that I don't want to sell anything to anybody. I want to find people that are already predisposed to be interested in what I have and educate them on why the only place you can get that specifically is from me. And then the differentiating factors became my care, my competence, my integrity, my willingness to say, I don't know, my willingness to do exactly what I said I was going to do or not say it. It became all those things that are all those skills that are available to all of us. All we have to do is grab onto them. They don't cost any money. But what I also discovered was very few people do all these things. Very few. And I remember saying to my kids when they started talking to me about selling, Dad, I don't want to sell. I hate sales. Sales is yucky. It's dirty. It's has this negative connotation. I don't want it's sleazy. I'm like, well, then don't sell. Just find people that already want what you have and figure out a way to get the messaging to a place where it's like, hey man, you can get this, you can get something like this a lot of different places, but you can only get this from me. And so that took selling and put a completely different uniform on it. It became education. It was no longer sales. And that was a big deal for me. And then when I teach people selling, I teach them that. The other component of selling I teach people, and I insist, is don't let yourself get steamrolled by somebody who's rude. If someone starts to be rude to you and you've given them no reason to be rude to you, this is what you have to do. I'm sorry, I need to interrupt you for just a second, but I have to you have to help me with something. I really need to understand what I've done or said to upset you because you're being disrespectful to me now and I don't understand why. I was calling to help you. And everybody that I share that with goes, "No, you can't do that." And I'm like, "You have to do that because two things are going to happen. One is 90% of those people are going to apologize to you because they weren't getting upset with you because of you. Their wife just left them, or they just found out their mother has cancer. Something's going on in their life that they brought to this conversation that has nothing to do with you. And once they apologize, now you have the opportunity to build maybe one of the deepest relationships that you've ever had, because that's what humans do when we forgive and apologize. The other 10% are assholes, and it's really good to figure out who the assholes are as quickly as possible so you don't have to call them again. And to me, that's what selling became. You hold yourself up, you don't put other people on a pedestal, you don't put yourself on a pedestal. You insist on some sort of reciprocal level of respect that you're willing to earn, and you don't sell anybody anything. If they're not ready to buy your stuff right now, call them back later. Put something down and say, I'll call you in 3 months. If something changes in the meantime, you know where to reach me and you know what you can do. And then you have this database that starts to build on people that you need to call tomorrow and people that you need to call 3 and 6 months from now. And when that database gets to a particular size, you're not making a whole lot of calls anymore. People are starting to call you. And that's how that evolution took place. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's you said something to me in the pregame. I that's what I call the time we spend talking before the record button gets hit because I do my own podcast and the pregames. Sometimes it's the best stuff. but but you had said that your upbringing involved being proper and polite and professional. And so with someone like you, one of the things I probably do is say, okay, Todd, let's drop that guy and let me hear from the real guy. Because if I have to do that with you, or I'll never get to the real you. Because you're going to put on, as probably you should, at least at the beginning, the proper face, the polite face, the professional face. Yeah, but that's not the real you. That's part of the real you, but that's not the whole you. So I'd want to find out more about the other guy. Does that make sense? Mhm. Yeah, it's a good word. It's a good word. Yeah, alignment is another good word. Hmm. Well, I was always like, I went to church every Sunday for 17 years and every holy day because my father insisted on that. And I don't mean to suggest that that was, forced or combative or dictatorial. He's a wonderfully gentle, kind man, non judgmental, but he's just like, I'm raising you Catholic, so this is what we're going to do. And so I did that. And then I went off to Notre Dame, which is a Catholic university. And I didn't go to church again till I was probably 35. I didn't leave God. I left the Catholic Church, the structure of it, the confinement of it. And these were perceptions of mine. They need not be considered realities because it was just my perception. And I was a kid. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I was just trying to find my way. But I had that internal belief. I remember asking my dad when I was about 17, I said, Dad, I don't get this religion thing, this God in the sky and this lady who had a kid and never had sex and miracles. And I mean, I don't know about this stuff. And I thought he was going to be pissed at me. But what he said was, as just the way he is, no, Mark, question your faith. That's how your faith gets stronger. You should question everything, and not to be combative, just intellectually curious. Question everything. That's how your belief system gets stronger in general. And that was maybe a turning point for me, because I was completely taken aback by that. I thought he was going to condemn me and I was going to hell. You know, like at 17, I'm toast. So I had that in me, and I was always praying. I was always talking to God. I was always trying to be grateful and thankful, but I wasn't going to church and I wasn't doing structured, formal theologic or religious work. Um, and then I had referred earlier to my divorce, which was very contentious, very combative, very costly, just bad, just really, really bad. And I came out the other end, you know, And I got to that fork in the road that we all get to a couple of times in our lives where it's like, I'm going to be an angry asshole, or I'm just going to get on with my life and go, hey, shit happens, And I think that's that fork in the road. I talk a lot about that with people because if you want to find hardship, Todd, and this, all you got to do is look. It's easy to find, right? And you can become a victim very easily because that is available to all of us just like that. The other choice is to be better, is to improve, is to move on. That requires more work. That requires more diligence. That requires more time. But I never understood it to be a choice. It was always, that's the only way I can go. This other bitter thing, that doesn't work for me. I'm not going to be the old guy on the porch yelling at the kids on their bikes in the street. I'm not doing that. And so I made that choice. And and then I came back and I went looking for a church the same time I went looking for a yoga studio because I was, I had to make that choice. Am I going to go, bar hopping and find chicks, or am I going to, continue to become a man, become a better father, become a better citizen, become more productive, and be able to look at myself in the mirror? And that's the choice that I made. And church was part of that. So I went looking around for a church, and I found one with lots of windows and flowers and positive music and a funny priest, and I stuck with it. And I went and I asked this guy about, I don't know, a year and a half into going to mass there, this little Puerto Rican priest, little tiny guy, really cool guy. I said, Father, can I ask you a question? He said, sure. I said, when do you hear confessions? And he looked at me and he goes, how about right now? And I said, okay. And he said, follow me. And he put this purple sash on and he said, let's go outside. There's a shade tree in the back. That's really a nice place to do this. And he was immediately trying to make this easy for me. He wasn't judgmental at all. He knew, because I told him I haven't been to confession in 35 years. I have no idea. I don't even remember what to do. And I remember he looked at me and he goes, Mark, I've been a priest for 35 years. If you think you're going to tell me something I haven't heard 100 times already, come on, I've heard it all. And you don't have to be specific. Just think about what it is that you've done that you want to be forgiven for, and then I'll take it from there. And he said a couple of Latin phrases, and he gave me 3 Hail Marys, which I thought was a pretty good deal for 35 years of sin. And here's your sins have been forgiven. And I got to tell you, Todd, I'll never forget that. I was my feet were floating off the ground. It was a spiritual experience like I've never had before. I felt so close to God right then and there. I picked up the phone. I called my father. I called my uncle. I called my kids. I called my girl. I called everyone. I said, I got to tell you this story. So that was my spiritual re-revelation, which was built off a foundation of having raised Catholic. And then it's just been, my connection with God has been really warm and comfortable and consistent and daily. And I look forward to it. And I just am so grateful all day, every day for it. It's amazing. It's 100% true. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I take pride in is that I consider myself a contrarian by nature. If you tell me something has to be done a certain way, I'm going to ask you why. And if you can't give me a good answer, I'm going to suggest to you there's probably a better way. And finding work is such a thing. get a resume, pay somebody to do your resume, send it online to a bunch of places, and wait. Nope. Dump all that. It's like the way that you negotiate, the way that you talk about money, the way that you interview, the way that you look for work, the way that you prepare for an interview, the words that you say, like I say to my salespeople about, stop the conversation and put the guy on the spot. Everything is contrary to what you would get. Like you referred to the Xerox selling. I took some of those when I first got out of college, and they were good, but I don't do any of that stuff anymore. I do permutations of that. So yeah, I question everything, and it's gotten me into trouble a little bit, but not much. Because I think most people, it's kind of like, I feel it's kind of like stand-up comedy. They say the stuff that everyone else is thinking, but no one else will say. That's kind of what I do. Like, Mark, how can you say that? I'm like, because it's true. What do you mean? What? Oh, well, you're going to offend somebody. That's not my responsibility. I have no intention to offend anyone. If they're offended, that's on them. You know, if I was intentionally trying to offend people, that would be one thing. But I don't ever intentionally try to offend. But I don't appease anybody or acquiesce to anybody just so I don't hurt their feelings. I mean, that's not fair to them. That's not being kind. That's kissing their ass. You know. Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, so he was a fighter pilot, and that speaks volumes. You don't get to be a fighter pilot unless you have some significant skills, an A+ personality, probably aggressive. You're a risk taker. You're pushing the limits of things. You're the best at what you do because that's what fighter pilots are, and but he was also a spiritual, grounded, faithful, good man. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was a gifted athlete, a very attractive woman, a very intelligent woman. She had a master's degree in fine arts. Very interesting. They treated us like humans when we were kids. They didn't treat us like kids. They respected us. They were very strict, but they encouraged us to press against boundaries and norms. My father used to say, "What's the first thing you do when an engine catches on fire in a plane?" And his favorite answer was nothing. You don't do anything because you're fully trained. Pause, which I teach everybody. The pause is one of my favorite things, especially when you're emotional. Don't react, just pause. And then all of that training that you took for years in flight school will kick in. Shut this off, turn that on, turn that engine off, steer to this direction. All that stuff is in there. Get the emotion of fear and anxiety out of your brain. It might only take 5 seconds. It might take 2 seconds, but just pause. Most of those planes crash because the pilot reacts emotionally. He doesn't pause. And so, you take the spirituality, and the other overriding thing, Todd, was sports. We all played sports. We were all individual and team sport athletes. And all my kids played sports. My brothers and sister played sports. Most of my friends were athletes. And as an athlete, as a fitness guy, the bonds that can form and the life lessons that you can learn at the gym, because everything is exercise. You don't do 900 sit-ups one day and get a six-pack. You do 5 sit-ups the first day, and then you go back a day after that and you do 10. And then 6 months later, you can look in the mirror and maybe see some results. But everything that's worthwhile happens incrementally over time with consistent effort over time. And this delayed gratification thing was always a part of my life. There was no one in my family ever pushed a quick fix or a miracle solution to anything. It was work, and then personal accountability was another trait that came. We weren't allowed to blame anyone or anything else. If we blamed anyone or anything else, we got in more trouble. We were best off when we did something wrong and we said, I did that, it's my fault, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. And then the punishment was less severe. But if we started saying, oh, that was so and so's fault, or I wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for this, man, we didn't support that at all. So those are some of the reasons I think I ended up the way I am. Mm. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, it was always something that appeared achievable to me. It was never out of my reach. It was right. I saw it. It was right. And my brother became a fighter pilot. I just talked to him earlier today. He was an F-15 fighter pilot and just retired from his commercial airline job. And in terms of like the best pilots in the world, my dad and my brother were both in that category, at least for a few years. And so I was not in awe of that. It was always kind of reachable. It was up to me. I never had any interest in that. Thank goodness, because I was too tall to fit into a fighter plane. I would have ended up in a bomber or something like that. I never would have heard the end of it from either one of them if I didn't become a fighter pilot. So thank God I didn't want to be one. But yeah, no, God bless him. He did a great job. And one of the things he said to me about religion was true of everything he said to me. He said, the reason that I'm bringing you to church every Sunday is because you're going to go off soon on your own to college and then wherever else. And you might need something to come back to later on when life gets challenging. And now you'll have that. You don't have to come back to this, but you will be able to. You'll know what it is and it'll be available to you. And God bless him. You talk about prescience. You talk about a guy that could see into the future. Thanks, Dad. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 As far as your audience that might be considering starting their own organization, I would say we bootstrapped everything. And for those of you who don't know what that word means, it means you use your own money. You don't borrow anyone else's money. You don't look for equity investors. And when you bootstrap something, you do everything with the humility of someone who's willing to do everything. Like, I remember emptying the trash. I remember painting the walls. I remember, picking up people that needed a ride, taking people to I did, imagine anything you could do for a good friend. I did that for everyone who joined my organization, until such time as we were able to reinvest profits, not revenue, profits, into the organization. And then we started investing, I think, wisely in only the necessary things. Like, for instance, when I went and bought office furniture for my first office, we didn't go to a furniture store. We went to a warehouse where other people that had bought new furniture and gone out of business sold their furniture back to the warehouse 30 cents on the dollar. So I was buying $1,000 pieces of furniture for $200. And when they said we had to redo the office, I let them do the construction, and me and a couple of buddies painted the place, right? So everywhere we could use our own time, effort, and money, we did. And so we became profitable very quickly. And we weren't spendthrift. We weren't cheap, but we were wise with regard to the way we used money. And what I saw, especially when I started to go out and try and help other entrepreneurs, because part of what I do is help people start their own businesses, because that's also the next step in professional development for some people. How do I do that? Well, don't go spending a ton of money in the hopes that you'll generate some revenue. Generate some revenue, and then you can determine where to spend the money. And it's like, to something you said earlier, you didn't say the phrase, but it was in my head when you were talking about sales. Nothing happens until someone sells something. Nothing. You can't hire anybody. You can't buy anything. And I saw so many companies spend, okay, we're ready to open the front door. Well, you've already spent $100,000. You have to make $100,000 now to break even. That's like daunting. It's the opposite of what you want to do. The other thing that I think was a key to my success, other than just treating people well, is not spending until we earned profit, not revenue. And then the second thing was, we're going to be something very specific to a very specific market. Like when I asked you earlier, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you said I help people who want to get better. And I'm like, yeah, but that's almost everybody. You can't help everybody. You got to pick a slot, right? And I'm sure you've wrestled with that, and maybe are still wrestling with that, because I am, because what I do can help everybody too, but you can't market to everybody. So what I've decided to do is pick an audience right now for no real reason other than they're my group, middle-aged men, and women are welcome to come. My stuff works for women. It works for young people. I helped all three of my kids, but my messaging is to middle-aged men. And even then, it's to middle-aged men that also have a worldview that I would call conservative, because that's the way I see the world. And those conversations are there's less friction in those conversations. There's more alignment in those conversations. There's more in common with those people, so I can be more effective. And that's just my opinion. It's held out to be true, fortunately. And then what I'm looking forward to, is you probably are, Todd, is as soon as that specific niche becomes enough for me, and I'm pretty close. That's a combination of income, revenue, diversity of clients, the type of work that I want to do, then I can start reaching out to other groups that I can help as well. But that's an interesting dilemma. So I think that you really can't be everything to everybody. Like when for instance, I was in the technical markets in software engineering, and I would say, well, within software engineering, like for example, today it's all AI, right? If I was in the recruiting business right now, I'd be running around looking for AI expertise, because everyone says they're an expert. No one is yet, because it's too new. And so the demand for these people is very high and the supply is very limited, and most recruiters can't play in that competitive landscape. So I went into markets where very specialized, and I was an expert in that specific market very quickly because all I talked to was people that did this. And so that those are the things that I think contributed most to my success. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. 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 Yep. Yeah. That, well, I would say to you, as presumptuous as this might sound, don't overthink it. Just accept it. It's like it is what it is. Who cares why? But at the same time, there's an old saying. I can't remember who to attribute it to. I want to say Michael Douglas, the actor, but that's probably giving him too much credit. What the one thing that men and women have in common is that they both prefer the company of men, and I that's true. You know. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, as you know, I mean, I'm from Boston, and being from the Northeast here. Well, you're British. I mean, British and Boston and New York are kind of like sarcasm, humor, dry. There's a little commonality there. I'm a wise ass. I mean, if the microphone's off, I'm a wise ass. But I think the other thing is, I think, and I'm a human nature guy. I love human nature. I don't. I think we're denying human nature now in a large sections of the world, and it's really causes frustration. Is that that men fight, men are physical, men can punch each other and hit each other. And honestly, I don't know if you've ever been in any fights. I have been in a couple. I think most men have at least been in a couple when they were young. And a lot of times when the fight's over, the argument's over. It's like you brush each other off, and sometimes those guys become your best friends. But women can't do that. So what they do, in my opinion, is they develop a heightened sense of ability to verbally and emotionally abuse. And that's their substitute for not being able to physically lash out. It's how they protect themselves. And I think that's true. I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. No. Yep. Yep. Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Uh, no, we'll find out how ill prepared I am to answer that question. I'm thinking of, I can see the faces of the people that I've trained. I think the first one is paying attention. I think this is a lost art in the world today. I think our attention is so distracted that we could our next mentor could be in front of us in Starbucks waiting for coffee, having a conversation on the phone, and we don't hear what he's saying, so we never ask him, "Hey, can I talk to you for 5 minutes?" And that guy was going to be our mentor for the rest of our lives, and we didn't even listen to what he was saying because we were not paying attention. So the people that I told, I'm going to hire you, I'm going to hire you without any experience because I don't want any bad habits. I don't want to deprogram anybody. And all the other recruiting firms out there don't teach people what I want people to know. We're going to treat people differently. We're going to do this a little differently. And I said, so one of the things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to do exactly what I tell you for a period of time. And the people that resonated with, the people that said, oh, that doesn't sound like a restriction, that sounds like a gift, like this guy's going to give me that gift of wisdom, those people were at my door at 5 o'clock at the end of the day with a yellow pad with 15 questions on it saying, you got a minute, you got a minute. They didn't just want my knowledge on the floor during the day, they wanted access to me after. They wanted to stay after school and learn more. Every one of the successful people did that. And that's unique. That's, I don't even know how you recruit for that skill because it's such a that's up to your mom and dad to give you that skill. If they don't give you that skill, you're going to be lucky if you get that skill. Um, Integrity was certainly part of it. I used to say to people when they would come to me and ask me, well, if I discount this, or if I, I'm going to block that guy from interviewing over there to give this guy that, if they wanted to do anything that I thought was morally or ethically questionable, I put I did not allow it, and they had to accept it. And the joke used to be, look, if you're going to press this issue, you got to give me the phone number of your mother and father. I got to call them up and have a conversation with them because this is unacceptable. This behavior is unacceptable. And we used to make a joke of that. And then, all this talk now about empathetic leadership and emotional intelligence, I was doing that since I was 15. That was just natural for me. And when people talk about that now like it's some sort of new skill, I'm like, you mean treat people the way you want to be treated? Oh, okay. I read that in the Bible when I was 7, right? So that's not new to me. So I think some of this stuff is just being a good person and attracting good people and not sacrificing your ethical standards or your moral standards for professional gain. I can't tell you how much money I left on the table for not violating a non-compete contract, or for not hiring somebody from a competitor, or for not taking a client that was legally I wasn't allowed to talk to for 12 months after. I never crossed that line. And I think I left a trail of people that appreciated that simple level of integrity, So those are some of the things that come to mind. Yeah, yeah. I can only imagine how challenging it would be, and not to get political because this isn't political, but the absence of, you mentioned it in the pregame, the absence of fathers in the family, the absence of a family unit where you have dinner together 5 nights a week, and your dad and mom maybe do your homework with you, or they read you stories before you go to bed, or you say prayers together, or you do chores together. There's that's where you learn this stuff. And if you're a latchkey kid with no direction and just an iPad, and your parents say good luck, some of those kids become massively successful, but the vast majority of them, I think, end up lost because they don't have any anchors. They don't have any there's no bricks in their foundation. It's the biblical thing, their foundation is built on sand. And you're right. I think most of my experience with those people, I didn't teach them that skill. I I taught them how to um, exaggerate that skill. I taught them how to use that skill. I didn't give it to them. Their parents did. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this too, because I'm curious. I think that I found as a teacher, because you're a teacher, the people that want to stay after class and ask you questions, you want to help them more. You want to be available to them more because they appreciate what you have to give more. And I think we don't. I didn't know that when I was a kid. Like I thought the kids that stayed after class to ask questions were kissing the teacher's ass, and some of them were, but some of them were also genuinely interested in knowing more. And those teachers went out of their way. It was almost like you felt like those kids got special treatment. Well, they did. You know why? Because they asked for it. Because they were willing to do the work. So, and my daughter's a nutrition coach, and she found similar to you in a different way, but similar. She didn't start out trying to attract women, but all she does now is help women because she has a couple of men, but it just turned out to be a female group. And her biggest frustration with clients is getting people to finish the entire protocol. Like go from beginning to, you can't stop in the middle. It doesn't work. You can't do 5 of the 10 things. You got to do all 10. So I've had this conversation with her a million times. I don't know what the answer is for either one of you, but I have the same problem. You can't help somebody who's not ready to be helped. You just can't. That's right. You know what's great about that, and I completely agree with you, Todd, is that that's something everyone can do. It's not easy, but it's simple. Like when you said earlier to me, you've had a couple people that tell you, "Well, I don't have time." And my head immediately said, "Get up a half hour earlier." What do you mean you don't have time? Just get up at 5:30 instead of 6. There's your half hour right there. And by the way, how many hours do you spend looking at YouTube videos? Okay. Yeah, give me 20 minutes of that time too. You're full of shit. You got plenty of time. You're just not using it wisely, right? There's the candor again. I apologize. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Well, you think I find that the people that engage me, that actually pay me because I ask for payment before I start my work, at least partial payment, because that's skin in the game. That's you're committing to this. Without that, you're not as committed as you would be otherwise, and that's a reality. That's a truth. That's human nature. Is when you can tell when they're ready. You can just tell. They just keep asking questions. They don't want to get off the phone. They're enthusiastic and they're respectful. And if they say they're going to call you at 1 o'clock, the phone rings at 1 o'clock. There's all these little tests of seriousness that you can sprinkle throughout your relationship with a prospect or a client. Like we used to do it in the placement business with resumes. All right, we just had this great conversation. All right, now this is what's going to happen next. If you're game, which you said you are under these parameters, and I can help you because I this is what I do. So send me your resume. I'm going to need that by 5 o'clock tomorrow. Can you do that? Oh yeah, no problem. Well, if 5 o'clock tomorrow comes and I don't have your resume, then you're not as committed to this as you said you were, because that's not a difficult thing to do. You push a button and I get your resume. So why didn't I get your resume at 5 o'clock? And that was always a very interesting conversation. And all it typically did was flush out something they chose not to share with you in the first conversation. A reticence of some kind, a conflict of some kind, ethically, morally, spiritually, a familial block, some sort of limiting belief, something that they need to surrender or get out of their way. But that litmus, to me, you gotta, and I'm sure you have places in your thing where you do this as well. Like, I'll meet you at the gym at 5 o'clock on Saturday morning. Well, if that person shows up, there's probably a high likelihood that they're interested in what you have to do. And 50% of those people probably don't show up because that's pretty early on a Saturday morning. So that's just an example, but you probably have quite a few that you can drop those seeds along the way. Yeah, well, work ethic. They all have a very strong work ethic, and with all due respect to my ex-wife, we haven't spoken in many, many years, and we don't get along at all. But she was a very hard worker and a very smart woman, so I can't take full credit for that. But work ethic is certainly one of them. They 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 don't limit themselves there, and this is the thing that I run into a lot. I think either I gave them this, my ex-wife gave them this, or somebody gave it to them, or they picked it up somewhere. They're not afraid to dream big. Most people are not capable of dreaming big. They can't get out of their home or their neighborhood or their hometown or what their father did for a living or the abuse they took from their uncle, or they can't get past that. My kids are like, okay, I just knocked that down. I'm gonna, like, we went and hiked the Inca Trail in Peru a few years ago, me and my two daughters. Like, you don't just pick up and hike the Inca Trail in Peru. I was 55 years old and I was at, 13,000 feet for 4 days, 28 miles, waking up in the dark. And they were like in front of me, and now they want to go to the Antarctic and they want to go see Alaska and they want to climb Mount Everest. It's like they don't put limits on themselves as to what they can do. And I'm really proud of that because most people do. And so I think work ethic, and then I just make the presumption that they're all, they all get themselves in trouble by being honest all the time about everything. But I'd rather they do that than not. So those are some of the things that pop into my head. Yeah. Yeah. I know what you, yeah, no, I get it. I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the exact phrase or the person, but I know I've heard different permutations on that myself over the years. One of the things that my podcast co-host, and he's a good friend. He was a professional rugby player for 20 years and very successful entrepreneur, family guy, dad. We have a lot in common. And he paid me a compliment one day not long ago. We were talking about the fact that we're coming up on our 100th episode for our podcast called The Imperfect Men's Club. That's the name of our podcast. You'd get a kick out of it. You should look it up. Maybe your audience would get a kick out of it too. We can put it in the show notes or something. But he said, the one thing that I don't think that you give yourself enough credit for, Mark, is I know that on Wednesday at 1 o'clock, you're just going to be there. Like, you're not going to show up. I don't have to worry about it. You're going to be there on time. You're going to be prepared. And even if you're sick or something's bothering you, you're not going to whine about everything. You're going to go, let's go. And I think that falls into this category. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I mean, it was him that paid me the compliment. And I thought, what a nice thing to be known for. Show up. Just show up. It's like that 90% of it's just showing up, you know? And so, and I'm sure in what you do, I mean, you can't do what you do if the people don't show up, right? And the people that excel are probably the ones that show up every day, right? Yeah. There you go. There you go. Yeah, there used to be. I don't know if you're a basketball fan. I guess you know Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, but Larry Bird was my guy because he was a Boston Celtic. And if you went to the Boston Garden back in the old days before they rebuilt the TD Garden, where the Bruins played and John Havlicek and Bill Russell and back in the day, if you went to the stadium after a Celtics game and you stuck around when everyone else was gone, you'd start to hear this almost like a horse, and you'd be like, "What is that noise?" And it was Larry Bird running the stairs after the game for like an hour, and then and everyone else was gone, and this guy at the time was the best player in the league, or at least one of the top five, and he is working his ass off running the stairs after the game. So yeah, these guys that are like exceptional that we see, these all-stars and these Hall of Fame guys, they're all hard workers. They're not just talented. I was watching the NFL Combine. You know what the Combine is? That's when they send all the college players that want to go into the NFL to this series of fields, and they put them through drills: 40-yard dash, 100-yard dash, weightlifting, high jumping. They test their physical ability, and the scouts are all there from all the NFL teams, and they're just taking notes. This is what the kid ran in and I'm watching these kids. They're kids. They're 20 years old. And I said to myself, every single one of these guys has the physical ability to play professional football. At this point, it's not about physical ability anymore. The guys that are going to make it are here and here, and they're going to outwork everybody, and they're going to show up every day. It's now become a non-physical journey. Now it's all about their mental fortitude, their toughness, their consistency, their persistence, and their ability to overcome things like injuries and challenges and losses. So I was astounded by that revelation, because I've been watching the Combine for years, and it just dawned on me this year. These guys are no longer in a physical competition. I thought that was interesting. Mm-hmm. Well, I kind of go back to what I was talking about when I was teaching my kids about selling. I think that most people misunderstand it, because they consider it pushy. They don't, no one helps them connect the dots between, well, this person, pick a commodity. This person needs a car. They already know they need a car, and they've already done the work, and it's clear that they want a Toyota. You don't have to do any of that work. All you have to do when they show up at your Toyota dealership is to answer all of their questions, treat them respectfully, and educate them as to what the advantages are of the Toyota Camry versus the Honda Accord. You don't have to do anything else. But if you start going, what's it going to take for me to put you in a car today? Like, I'm walking out, right? So it's not salesy. It doesn't have to be salesy. That's what most people, that phrase, always be closing, ABC. You've heard that phrase, but I hate that phrase. I would say never be closing. If you're closing, you're not doing the job properly. You're not educating people enough. You're not sharing enough information with people. If you're trying to close people all the time, that's why it gets a bad name. And to this day, dude, if I go to a car dealership, I get anxiety attacks when I get out of my car and start walking towards the dealership. I anticipate this sleazy, salesy guy that's going to try and convince me of something. And it's not fair of me to do that, because not everyone does that, but enough of them still do. And I think that's the most misunderstood thing about sales is, if you're doing it real well, it's actually kind. And if you're not doing it well at all, it's nice, and there's a big difference between being kind and being nice. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they call it the transformation. What's the transformation? How am I going to be different when I'm done with this? What's it going to look like when and my thing has always been, well, you're wallowing in uncertainty right now. Clearly, you have a lot of questions you don't have answers to. You don't know what to do or where to go or what to do next or who you want to be. It's all clarity. Everything's cloudy. So the one thing I will promise you is, you will no longer be cloudy. You will be clear as to what you're going to do and why you're going to do it, and who you want to become. We'll work through all of that. So clarity. And then what happens when you get clarity, it happens with your people too. Now you start to get confidence. And then once you get confidence, now you start contemplating being courageous. And courageous is when you start to take risks, and risk is where all the progress happens. That's how I see it. Mhm. Well, I think when I first started in recruiting, I was given a box of yellow index cards with the names and phone numbers of people written on them that they gave to the new people. And the purpose of making those phone calls at night, because people, we used to have to call them after work because you couldn't talk at work about leaving work. And so, and everyone had a landline, so you could get somebody's home phone number during the day, and you'd call them at night. And it would be, it would be, ask me the question again, Todd. I'm sorry. I was distracted by something. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, resilience is one of my favorite words. It's right up there with fortitude. I think it's the key to success in anything. I think that, I think anticipating hardship, without expecting it, and being able to say, okay, well, this is just hardship. I've seen it before. I'll let it pass. I'll move past it. Back to self accountability and personal responsibility for everything. What could, if something goes wrong and I don't sell to this person, or they say no to me, what can I learn from that? What could I have done differently? So taking it, what selling does, if you do it properly, is when you encounter hardship or failure, whatever you want to call it, they didn't buy my stuff, or they said no to me, or don't call me again, or don't ever call here again, you asshole, whatever, however severe it might be, that the great sales rep learns that that's just what life is, and that's okay, and it's not personal. I'm going to compartmentalize that. I'm going to pick my bag up, and I'm going to keep moving forward. So I think there's no question it builds resilience, because you have to handle objection, and you have to learn how to depersonalize it. But I also think one of the things I learned early from one of my mentors was, at 5 o'clock or whenever you stop, the last thing you do is, at least 15 minutes, you put the phone down, you put everything down, and you look at your desk, back when there were desks with papers and stuff on them, and you organize everything, and you take out a pad and you jot down, you throw that away, put it down as a task, throw that away, put it down, put that in the database, put that where it belongs, and you organize your desk, and you put all your thoughts down before you leave, so you don't take that home with you. When you get home, you're home. You're with your family, you're with your kids, you're with your wife, whatever, or just your buddies, or depending on your circumstances. But if you don't stop the day and put stuff where it belongs and bring closure to the day, then you're anxious about that all night. You don't sleep as well. You get up early. You got to get to the office early to get your stuff. It triggers all kinds of bad emotion. So that, I suppose, you would call organization. And I was never a really, or I was always more of a doer, instead of an organizer. I was less of a details person and more of a strategy guy. So that was a good lesson for me to learn. And when you were talking earlier about, um, bringing home something, bringing home your work or something, I can't remember, but it was like, yeah, when you learn how to sell, the thing I remember, and I laugh about it still, is bringing that voice home and hearing pretty early on, stop trying to close me. I'm not a prospect. It's like, okay, different voice. Sorry, you're right. It's hard to turn that switch on and off, you know? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. I do. I think it's, I kind of look at it as a bridge. I would be hard pressed to imagine too many people that would start a side hustle, have that side hustle begin to succeed, and not want to turn that side hustle into a full time gig, right? And which is great. That's fine. But that doesn't have to be the case. That side hustle can remain a side hustle. And I think that it makes me think of one of the first things I do with prospects of mine, no matter what, side hustle, full time job, start your own business, no matter what. What do you love to do? Right? What what do you know so well that you could teach it to other people? And is that at an intersection where you can see the possibility of monetizing that? Love to do it, know it well enough to teach other people, and I see where I could charge for that, where someone would be willing to pay for that because of the value of it in this particular area. And I think that without that self-reflection, self-awareness exercise, which very few people do, then you're shooting in the dark. So I would say to anybody that's contemplating a side hustle, yes, I think it's a wonderful idea. Yes, I think everyone who's able to do it should do it. And number three, I think there's some soul searching and self talk and self assessment to find your purpose, to find your true purpose. I have a workbook called Find Your True Purpose, actually, because of this particular reason. Which I'll make available to people. I've been giving it away for years because I just kept having the same conversation with people. But if you can get to that intersection of, I love it, I'm good enough at it where I could teach other people and I can see the opportunity to monetize it, and you have a full time job, give it an hour a night, give it a couple hours on the weekend, get a schedule together where you can give it consistent effort. Because without consistent effort, even 15 minutes a day is enough if you do it every day, or 2 hours a week is enough if you do it every week. But if you can give that consistent energy, you'll find a couple things. You'll find out whether it's feasible pretty quickly. And if it becomes feasible, it will start to enliven you. It will start to energize you. You'll start to get emotionally attached to it. And yeah, that's what I would do. I would have that exercise. I'll make the workbook available, and it's a challenging workbook to get to your true purpose because you have to ask yourself a lot of questions that you wouldn't normally want to ask yourself, and you probably get some answers you don't want to hear, and that's why most people don't do it. But that's what I would do first. And then, as well as anybody, Todd, there's so many. A website costs nothing, but I wouldn't recommend that you get a website first. I think sell something first before you do anything else. Figure out what it is you're going to sell. Maybe it's a service, maybe it's a product. Have somebody confirm that it's viable by paying you for it, and then start doing the other stuff. Most people do the other stuff for, I want a logo, I want a business card, I want a brand, I want a website. I'm like, I want to incorporate. Why would you incorporate until you have to send out your first invoice? You don't need a corporation. So wait till you have to send out your first invoice. So I guess what I'm doing is answering your question further by thinking through what I've done and what I've coached other people to do. Don't do the stuff that is only required to look like you have your own company. Just do the stuff that's going to generate your first sale. And that's how you test the viability of your idea. Does that help? Okay. Mm-hmm. Of course. Yeah. I mean, everybody is capable of it. It doesn't require any monetary investment. I mean, you could certainly pay a coach to teach you how to sell, but you can also get on the internet and pull up as much information as you'd ever want to see, figure out over a period of investigation, well, these people seem to have the highest reputation for capability and ethical standards. I'm going to follow them and just read their stuff. Like, and you could name 100 of them: Tim Ferriss, Gary Vaynerchuk, Tony Robbins. I mean, pick a style, pick somebody who resonates with you, and just start following them. The other thing, dude, that it strikes me all the time: if you have an idea, go find someone who's doing it already and sign up for their newsletter and take their journey, right? What does their landing page look like? What does their email newsletter look like? How do you get from the free giveaway to the purchase page? What is it? What are the color scheme? I mean, everybody's, you could just copy somebody. Like my big joke with people years ago, I still use it, is like, plagiarism is only wrong when you're in school. As soon as you get out of school, everyone plagiarizes everything. Your only obligation is to be honest enough to make it your own. Don't just copy someone else. Follow their guidance and bring your own personality to it so it becomes yours. But you don't have to start with a blank page. That's silly. I'm glad. I'm glad. Well, thank you, Todd. Word to the wise. I don't do everything correctly. I don't do everything. I'm sure there's plenty of room for improvement, but one of the other lessons that I've learned, and I share it with everybody because it's just such a wise thing, is if you have this idea, then you probably also have access to a network of people. They might not be friends, but enough about them to have their email address and their name. You could get their LinkedIn profile and look into their background a little bit, but you could send a message to 10, 15, 20 people and say, I have this idea, right? This is what it is. What do you think? And with some context, which I'll share with you, like a paragraph or two or a couple pages, whatever. This is what it is, what it looks like. This is what I'm thinking about charging for it. This is why I'm doing it, what I think it'll help with. Would you pay for something like that? Would you pay $500 for something like that? No, I wouldn't. Oh, Mark, you know what? Based on what you just described, yeah, I would consider paying 500. Okay, you make the list, and then go back and you get like 10 people that said they would consider paying $500, and you go back and say, I'm doing a beta with this thing next month, and because it's a beta, but it's everything you said you wanted, and you said you'd be interested in learning this stuff, I'm going to offer it to you for $200 because you're one of the first 10 people in. I get 10 people signed up, I'll have a group, and then I can take that $2,000 and reinvest it in version 2 of the product, which is essentially going to be version 1 plus all the feedback you 10 people are going to give me when I put you through the beta course, right? So it's like, you don't have to guess what people want. You can ask them today. Yeah. Todd, somebody said to me, I think it was a British guy, um, don't spend your life thinking that other people know more than you do. And I thought that was a very interesting thing to say, because we do. Like, we do. You know a lot of the stuff that I know, and I know a lot of the stuff you know. And the only way to figure out what you know that I don't know and what I know that you don't know is to have more conversations. Yeah, I mean, we've covered some of that. I love the word mentorship. I love, like, if I was to give anybody advice on mentoring, it would be that if you're looking for a mentor, invest a lot of time and energy in that, because most people don't invest any time or energy in that. They luck into a mentor circumstantially, or they never have one. And the mentor can accelerate your progress exponentially. Um, I think the challenge with mentoring today's generation is exactly what we've discussed. It's getting people that will pay attention. It's getting people that will show up consistently. It's getting people to take ownership and responsibility for their own outcomes. And one of the other things that I've done that I've tried to be cautious of, I've probably done it with you, but it's because you're a great audience, is share too much. Um, and I don't mean too much in the sense that I've shared something I shouldn't have shared. It's like the human mind can only remember so much stuff. And if I were to get better, if I had the luxury of every iteration of a training session with someone, I could use that to get better in the next one. I think I would share less content at a time and more context, right? So you don't have to remember 15 things. Just remember these two things in the context of this, and use them in the context of this. And then 2 months from now, after you've been using them for 2 months, I'll bring another two to the table. But when I started mentoring people, I would bring all 10 to the table, like so excited to give everybody everything. And like people don't remember any of that. So that's the one caution I would give to someone who's contemplating being a mentor. Don't don't feed people through a garden hose, right? Let them sip from the tap. And I still make that mistake because I get excited. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Hmm. Yeah, I think the noise from other people is, you got to figure out how to quiet the noise from other people. Like, I love, as you can tell, I adore my father, right? I admire him. I look up to him. When I told him when I was about 30, I'm leaving this big job with all these benefits and money to start my own company, he thought I was nuts. He told me, "You're crazy. What are you doing?" Well, he worked for the same company for 35 years, right? So his perspective was irrelevant with respect to that particular piece of information. So you're going to get noise. And what I found is you never get noise from the people that are above you. You only get noise from the people that are below you. And one of my favorite sayings, and I wish I could attribute this, but I can't remember who said it to me. Never accept criticism from someone from whom you would not seek advice. And if you sit on that for a second after we're done, it'll sink in. It's like, man, because everyone wants to tell you not to do stuff. Everyone wants to tell you you can't do stuff. Everyone wants to tell you, who do you think you are? You know, and when the self-doubt creeps in and the inner critic starts screaming at you, you start listening to those people, and you got to figure out a way. Maybe it's not a question that you were looking for, but it's what popped into my head when you asked me. If you can quiet that noise, then it's a game changer. Same concept. Yeah. Same concept. And we do. It's easy to let that noise in. And, you know, in today's day and age, there's so much noise from everywhere. You got to shut stuff off. I hope I answered your question. Yeah, my buddy, my podcast host, we have a running. It's not an argument; it's a disagreement. But I also agree with him. I mean, just what you said. It's like, don't ever take advice from family and friends, ever, never, ever, ever. And I'm like, never, almost never, maybe, but every once in a while, because. But it's true. Their love for you, and this is one of the things, and maybe this is to help you wrap up. But it's one of the things that I talk to people about in initial conversations as well, is if we start talking about who you are and why you are who you are, I almost could guarantee you we're going to get back to a point where at some point in your life, someone who loved you or you looked up to or was a person of authority said, you should do this. Your parents said it, your coach said it, your teacher said it, your guidance counselor said it, your favorite uncle said it, and so many people, Todd, in my experience, are doing what they do right now because someone else thought it was what they should do. It's like my guidance counselor in high school said, you should go to a good school and study business and go to work for a big company. And she meant well, but that's exactly the opposite of what I should have done, because she didn't really know who I was, because we didn't have the opportunity to share with one another who I was over a long period of time. So there's a lot of misguided stuff going on out there with good intentions. And that might be the most dangerous place to be of all, because when someone who you love and respect says you should do something, most of us will do that, you know, and then we get caught in someone else's box. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, it's a it's repetition for sure. Um, my scene with people right now is, you know, it's a 1 to 3 hour experience. It's a 30-minute call where I flush out what it is that you need help with. I bounce off you some candor, like, you know, you're wrong about that, or you should think about that differently, or maybe there's a different way of doing this. And then if they engage my services, I charge them for 1 hour, and we sit down at that hour and we go through everything we just talked about. The True Purpose Workbook. I give them a workbook to help them with their LinkedIn profile. I give them a workbook to help them prepare for interviews. I give them a workbook on how to turn an interview into an offer, and another workbook that says that shows them how to get in front of decision makers instead of just chucking resumes at online job openings. And I give them all that work, and I give them strategy and direction and tactics. And then I say, go away for 2 weeks and do the work, and then come back and we'll do a second hour. And the second hour, we go over everything. But if they're like back to my recruiting days, if they show up on time, if they listen to what I tell them to do, and they show me their work. So when they go through the workbook and they do the work, they're filling things out and they send me the work. And I'm like, okay, now I can do something with this. This is a piece of clay. Now I can turn this into a sculpture, right? But it's really, all I really need is people's cooperation. All I need is them to show up. And because you've done it a few times during this conversation, your facial expression has changed, and you've had an epiphany. Most of it's been, I paid somebody to tell me that, which is fine, dude. Good for you. But like, you're engaged. This is interesting to you. You're obviously interested in learning from this. That's what I need. That's all I need, is that kind of interest and engagement, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. 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 Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think that the word blueprint, the word framework, system, process, structure. Yeah. I think that we need those things. And I actually resisted those things for a long time because I thought I'm great at thinking on my feet. I'm an improv guy. Just throw something at me and I'll toss you back the right answer. And you can get by with that for a while, but as soon as you add structure to something, it becomes more easily digestible for people. It becomes more easy for people to understand, and so then you can scale it out to more people. So you're serving the world better when you add structure to your process. And I can't forget to mention, one of the things that's been so life changing for me in the last couple of years is my morning routine. And I thought this would resonate with you as a fitness guy, because part of it is just that. And even though I'm not a heavy weightlifter anymore, I don't run anymore, I'm 63 years old, I do yoga, I stretch, I do breath work, and I'm physically active, and I walk a lot and do yard work a lot. But it's exactly what I do. The same thing every morning as soon as I wake up. And it begins by getting right out of bed, right? I make my bed almost immediately. And if you haven't seen the video on the military guy who talks about making your bed, you got to look that up on YouTube. He gives a commencement speech. He's dressed in a white military garb with all kinds of medals. And he talks about the importance of making your bed. It's one of the best speeches I've ever heard. I put sunflower oil in my mouth and swish it around for 20 minutes. That's an Ayurvedic Indian thing that is supposed to be good for your digestive system. Coffee, tea, Wim Hof breath working on my yoga mat, stretching out, meditation, prayer, visualization, journaling. The whole thing takes me less than an hour. It's a game changer with everything else that I do. So not that it fit into this slot, but I wanted to mention it because you keep asking me, what would you recommend? What would you recommend? My morning routine that I adopted in my 60s, and I've been an athlete my whole life, has changed my life spiritually, emotionally, and physically. So, Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. Yeah. And I like your gratitude. That's one of my other favorite words. When I default to any emotion, it's always gratitude, because I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard it more than once, Todd, that if you are feeling really grateful, like truly grateful, there's no room for any negative emotion. There, you can't be grateful and angry at the same time. It's mentally impossible. It physiologically doesn't work. So you can't be angry, you can't be anxious, you can't be sad, you can't be anything negative if you're feeling grateful. There's no room. I found that fascinating. Well, yeah, what he said. Yeah, that's certainly something I think about more lately. And it's something that I talk to more people about, because I think a lot of people and a lot of guys that are my age, a little younger, a little older, they're occupying some of their mind space with that question. Certainly, I would like to be remembered as a great dad. Um, that's really up to three people, so I don't get a lot of votes in that one. But I'm pretty confident about that one. I spend a lot of energy on that one. A good friend, and I would like to have left a lot of people thinking, he served me, he helped me, and it makes me think of one of my buddies, one of my really good friends, asked me a couple months ago, can you help this young man who's one of my daughter's friends? He grew up in the neighborhood and our families were good friends. He's 27 and he's searching for something. And I just talked to him and I thought, you should talk to Mark. And I asked my friend, Miles, I said, well, what do you want me to do for him? And he said, why don't you do for him what you did for me? Because I hired Miles and trained Miles years ago. And I go, what did I do for you? And he goes, you gave me confidence. And I thought, I'm going to hang on to that one. So I would like to think that I've left quite a few people feeling a little bit better about what they were capable of doing than before they met me. Oh yeah, that's a long list of risky things that one can do with confidence that one can't do without confidence. But yeah, no, I mean, the first time you do something that you were petrified to do, it's difficult to describe that feeling. It's something you want to replicate pretty quick. You ever see the movie with Jim Carrey called Yes Man, where he's yes man, like the word yes and the word man. You watch it when you have a moment. He finds himself in he's a loser at the beginning, and he bumps into this guy. I won't ruin the story, but one of the guy's adages was, what I'm going to teach you is, when you leave me now for the rest of your days, say yes to everything that you would normally say no to. So he was like bungee jumping off of things. He even robbed a bank, I think. It was just like, but what happened to his character when he went from saying, no, I don't want to go to that party, I'm not going out tonight, I want to stay in, I don't want to meet that girl, I don't, no, 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 no. What happens to him when he starts to say yes? It's not a great movie, but what a wonderful life lesson. Saying yes to stuff that scares you. It's a great lesson. Sure does. Yeah, sure does. Yeah. Mm, that's right. That's right. Yeah, no, and you what's it? Ask for forgiveness later. Don't ask for permission. Ask for forgiveness later. I'm a huge fan of that statement. I've used that my whole life. Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, oh, the name just jumped out of my book. It's M. Scott Peck is the author. The road less traveled. Yes, thank you. Yes, the road less traveled. There's another little one that I read more recently. The War of Art. Um, Stephen Pressfield. It's a short book, and he writes all about what it means to be a professional, to be a pro, and very interesting life story. Got his fame and fortune very late in life, and if you're a creator, it's a great little book, and you can read it in a sitting. The War of Art. Prayer. Yeah, prayer. And I think meditation and prayer are the same thing. Meditation is to the universe and prayer is to God for me. But I think I think we take prayer for granted. Oh, I love them both. That's not fair. I'm I'm doing them both. I'm not listening to you. I know. I would have to go with meditation because I've done more of it, and I already taught I can get myself into a state of presence in a matter of seconds now, and it's really powerful. But cold showers are awesome, you know. So, oh yeah, borrow money when you can. Don't wait until you need it, because when you need it, you won't qualify for it. So my first boss told me that, and he said it's a credit line thing. If you got a house, get a credit line. Get 150 grand credit line. If you don't touch it, it doesn't cost you anything, but it's there, and it'll be there 5 years from now when you actually need a little money or whatever. That came in handy a couple times for me. Me too, Todd. Yeah, me too. Yeah, like I said, it's pretty simple. I think you can find me on LinkedIn, and I think you might put my LinkedIn profile in the show notes or something, and my website, which is again markaylward.com, MarkAylward. I do have some pretty good free video content on my YouTube channel, which is also my name. And I encourage people to go look through my stuff. I got about 150 articles on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter. I have 100 episodes of my podcast, The Imperfect Men's Club, which is we have a lot of fun with that. It's interesting conversation. We'll talk about stuff like this, and then my website. So that's and what I would encourage people to do is if you want to if what I'm saying resonates with you and you want to connect with me, just get on my calendar and I have a couple of questions in my Calendly calendar when you sign up. It's a Zoom call, so we'll get to see each other. And a couple of questions about what's challenging you. What do you want to talk about? Give me some context. And then when we get on there, in 20 minutes, I'll be able to tell you whether I can help you. And then the last 10, I'll tell you how. And if you don't want to engage my services, I'll leave you with at least a couple of tips. A couple of them I probably shared with you already right here. But it's worth everyone's while to check in for 30 minutes. And I'm still customizing how I teach people because everyone's different. So rather than say, go get this or go get that or look at this or look at that, give me that 30 minutes and all those free workbooks will come your way no matter what. And if you need my help, we can figure it out together on that call pretty easily. There you go. Yeah. Thank you, Ted.